All right, we are back. Mark is back here on the show talking week 14. A few things have happened since we last talked here on the show. I feel like that's the case more often than not
Yeah.
as of late. But of course, we've got some interesting news. I just saw this clip come through today, Mark. I'm not sure if it was today or not,
Yeah.
but we've got to share it with the audience and get our reaction here. Um, so just a quick backstory for those who may not be familiar. Um, Michael Strahan holds the single season sack record, 22 and a half sacks. He recorded this record breaking sack against Brett Favre. I think it was 2010. I can't actually remember the
No,
exact
it
year.
was
It was earlier. Was it
er,
before that?
Strahan
Like oh seven.
retired after that. I think it was the '07 Super Bowl win. So I think it was
Okay.
'06 or
Okay. Well,
it
there
was
you go.
earlier. It was earlier. Yeah.
And it's a an infamous play because Brett basically kind of like fell down and gave Strahan the sack essentially, even though Strahan was on his way to get the sack
He
anyways.
would he would have got the sack,
He
but
would have.
Favre
Brett threw it
didn't
away,
fight him. He
right?
didn't fight him on it for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. And it broke Mark Gastineau's record that had lasted for over 20 years, the great pass rusher from like the 80s, with the New York Jets. Here is a apparent confrontation between Mark Gastineau and Brett Favre that is extremely real and extremely awkward. Here, this is what they use to promote the upcoming 30 for 30. But this moment, at least as far as I'm concerned, seems extremely authentic and very weird and awkward.
You I thought we met a long time ago. At least I saw you.
Right.
How you doing?
When you fell down for him. I'm going to get my sack back. I'm going to get my sack back, dude.
You probably would hurt me.
Well, I don't care. You hurt me. You hurt me. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
You really hurt me. You hurt me, Brett.
We got to get back to this, Brett. I'm sorry.
And then it continues on after that. Wow. That was I think that was 100% authentic. I think that was
100%.
Real. Yeah.
And Favre, you could tell his reaction is real. He's looking at me like,
yeah.
what?
It's like, what?
It's hard
Favre,
to make that...
let me say, I am no Favre fan, especially with all the recent news. But he handled that about as well as someone could.
I was just going to say, it's hard to make Favre look like a sympathetic figure. That did right there. Listen, there are some people who handle record-breaking things really well and with a ton of class. Barry Sanders the other day just released a statement because it was possible that Ashton Genty was going to break his record. And I think still can. I think if the playoff games count, I think he might still be able to say like, oh, it counts, because I do think Barry Sanders' bowl game rushing yards counted in that season, whatever it might be. But Barry handled it the way everyone you'd like to think does, saying like, the records are meant to be broken. This kid's a stud, blah, blah, blah. Gasso clearly there, it's like, it's ruined his life. It's like,
well,
dude.
Apparently he makes the case that that's the reason he's not in the Hall of Fame. It's like, all right, dude, if because you think that holding a single season record like that is the difference between the Hall of Fame and not, I don't know about that. So
no. If you're a Hall of Famer, you're a Hall of Famer. And it's funny because if you were to tell me like who is Mark Gastineau, I'd have been like, so I don't really know. But then you bring that up and you're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's awkward.
It's very, very awkward. Anyway, a perfect springboard into our Week 14 recap. The playoff picture is narrowing. We're getting closer and closer to that final push here with the remaining month or so of the regular season. Let's get into it. All right. Well, we've got Mark back. Appreciate having you back on the show. Did a solo one last week. And now that we are really a month away from the end of the regular season, really going to tailor these shows and hone in on the matchups that matter, the playoff implication specific games. And so as always, we'll start with our best win, worst loss of the week. Mark, please take us away. Your best win. Let's start with that one.
I got to go to Los Angeles and give a shout out to the Rams.
Yes,
I mean, this was probably the best game of the NFL season so far as the Rams beat the Bills. And The sad thing is I had it on a secondary TV. I had it on my laptop because I was the idiot who was stuck watching the Bears and the Niners and ripping my hair out and my eyes out and wishing death upon myself.
Shout out meth streams. Let's
and
go.
I just kept, shout out. I just kept looking at this at the other game, going like, wait a minute, this is turning into an instant classic. And it was that. And I say it's the best win for the Rams because if you look at that division right now, I don't think any of us thought the Seahawks would be starting to pull away at week 14, and they are. So that the Rams finding a way to beat, in my opinion, the second best team in the AFC, maybe the best team in the AFC, in their building when they needed to win, and when the Bills were also trying to win because they're trying to keep pace with the 1 seed. It was a Herculean effort. Matt Stafford is absolutely phenomenal. The offensive talent on both sides of the field was just spectacular. And it was really, really great because now tomorrow, or in 48 hours from now, Thursday Night Football, it's a win or go home game it seems like for both teams. And I think a large part of that is because the Rams won the game against the Bills. I'll say this for the Bills. Listen, they won the AFC East. You know what I mean? They were playing catch up to the Chiefs anyways. It's a bad loss in the sense that it really probably does kill their chances for the 1 seed, but this Bills team is still very good. And they have a couple of these games every year, right? Where it's just like Josh Allen goes off. I think I saw the stat where again, the games that Josh Allen does close to what he did in this game, which no one has ever done in NFL history, 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns. The Bills are under 500 in those games. And it just goes to show you that every once in a while, the Bills defense and Sean McDermott's defense just collapses. And in those collapses, he is able to keep them alive. But the Bills are a better team when the defense plays well and Josh Allen can just hand the ball off more and still be the MVP of the league. Josh Allen's the MVP, but the Rams win the game of the season so far.
Yeah, it's my best win too. I agree. That's a phenomenal game. You mentioned it, instant classic. Those were the words that came to mind for me as well. It was a great game, awesome to watch. 2 great quarterbacks battling it out, 2 great offenses duking it out. I think this says more about the Rams offense and their talent than it does about the Bills' shortcomings. Yes, you don't want to get in shootouts and give up 44 points to any opponent in the NFL. And, that's something that I don't think we'll see of the Detroit Lions, for instance, or like maybe the Kansas City Chiefs in crucial moments. But any team is capable of getting bit by, we saw the Steelers, a phenomenal defense get worked by the Bengals. It's just like the great offenses are hard to stop in the NFL. Yeah. So I'm not going to put too much, credence into that aspect of the game for Buffalo in terms of what they gave up. But it is something. It's in the stat books. It's there. It's in the record. But Buffalo is still, to me, one of the top 3 teams in the NFL currently. I agree that really hurts their chances at the 1 seed because now I think Pittsburgh's really the only team that has a shot, and that's only because they play Kansas City and can force Kansas City, to have that, 3rd loss potentially when that time comes. Buffalo has beaten them obviously earlier in the year, but at the time that it comes, it could mean everything. And so Pittsburgh, the 2 of their 3 losses are against NFC opponents. That's that's big right there for sure. But I think the Rams are for real, man. Like, here come the Rams. Like, we can't sleep on them anymore. I were to, guess who's going to take over and win the NFC West as of today, based on their play in recent weeks, as great as Seattle's been, I'm going to go the Rams. Just Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua is a real game changer.
When they're healthy,
have somebody like that.
Yeah, when they're healthy, it's great. I'll say this, Dan. My final point on this will just be to say this is the type of offense with the Bills that is really explosive and fun. But when you're not running the football, like you said, the Lions wouldn't give up 40, something points. I tend to agree because the Lions can just go shift into mode where it's like, we're going to have a 12 play, 8-minute drive. And when you do a drive like that and then score, your opponent literally can't score as many points because they don't have the ball as often.
They still have the opportunity.
So Buffalo, while it's great to be able to score in 5-play drives or 6-play drives really quickly, especially at the end of the game if you need a score, when you lose your running attack, it's really then hard for you to keep your scoring down for your opponent when you're giving the ball right back to them. I know it seems like oh wow, what a my team couldn't even get 5 yards of offense in the first half. I'd love to have that problem, right? Where it's like you're scoring too quickly. But I think that was part of it when their defense just didn't have it. And the Rams had a great game plan. Sean McVay outcoached Sean McDermott. And so you almost want to give your defense a break by just putting up a 12-play, 14-play drive. And the Bills, just when they're not running the ball, aren't built that way.
Well, and to the coaching point too. I mean, a lot is being said about that late in the game management of choosing to do quarterback sneaks at the goal line with Josh Allen.
Timeout and the 9 players on the field.
No, these are just blunders you can't have when you're trying to win a game. I mean, that could have been the total difference in who won that game. And so those matter in these types of crucial situations late in season, late in games. Worst loss for me, Mark, goes to the Cardinals. The same exact matchup from 2 weeks ago that was the worst loss. It goes to the Cardinals once again. You had to get the win this time around. You lost to the Seahawks 2 weeks ago. Not only do you need this win because it's an opponent that you're trying to take over for the NFC West title, but because this was going to solidify a 3-game losing streak and essentially knock you out of playoff contention. Now, in reality, they're 1.5 games behind, so it's not remotely out of the realm of possibility, but they would have to go on a run, and they would also need the Seattle Seahawks and the Rams to completely kind of fall apart now for the Cardinals to take advantage. It's just, man, like, as good as Kyler Murray is, Mark, I've been saying this for like a month now. Where are the key moments where he is stepping up to win for his team? It's not happening. We're not seeing him elevate, and that's a problem.
So it is also my worst loss, which is really funny because I had strongly considered the Atlanta loss, which we'll talk about, and I'd strongly considered the Green Bay loss, which we'll talk about as well. The reason I didn't go with either of those two is because you nailed it. The Arizona Cardinals were at home. Like, this is the game. It's like, okay, you lost, but you had the division. You were the golden child of that division 2 weeks ago. That loss to Seattle turned it on its head. Now Seattle's been the golden child. You had a chance to like take the ball back, and like you just got outmanned, outcoached, turnovers, ugly turnovers from Kyler, and it's just demoralizing. It's not like you lost on a fluke or a bad call or something like that. We can be like, we got robbed. Like, remember the Lions lost to the Cowboys and it was a horrible, horrible bad call. Yes, Dan Campbell did like the bad 4th down call, but it was like a huge missed call from the refs. And you're like, we got screwed, and the Lions missed out on home field advantage and had to go to San Francisco last year to play in that NFC title game. This is the opposite. It's just like you just lost in you got absolutely stiff-armed into the ground, boat raced, and you made bad mistakes. That defense from Seattle is playing really well. I think Seattle should still be considered the favorite to win this division right now, unless the Rams or team? Well, I think that the Rams have a higher ceiling, but I think overall right now, the Seahawks are a little healthier and are right now, I think, the better overall team, more complete team. But I think the Rams have the higher ceiling because you saw when you have Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp, you're elite. Now, I will say the Seahawks also, Dan, have the hardest schedule of those 4 remaining teams. I'm going to bring it up here really quickly because if you're Seattle, you think, can we get to 10 wins, right? If we get to 10 wins, it's going to be hard for any of the other teams to get to 10 wins with only 4 games remaining. But they are hosting Green Bay. They are hosting Minnesota. Those are 2 tough games. Luckily, they're at home. They are then on the road against Chicago. That's their easy win. And then they're on the road against the Rams in the final season. So 3 of the 4 are really tough. Could I see the Seahawks losing 3 of 4 down the stretch? Absolutely. I think Green Bay and Minnesota are better teams, but both of those games are at home. You'd like to think that they could steal one of those games. You beat the Bears, you're 10-7, and you probably win the division. So Seattle's in control, but it is a tough sled of games for them in the Final Four.
In the NFC North, speaking of the Lions, that game between the Packers, that was shaping up to be an instant classic as well. Thursday Night Football.
It was a classic.
Yeah, I mean, it was 34-31, the final. And the Lions, interestingly, at the very end of the game, had an opportunity to kick the game-winning field goal. Dan Campbell goes, you know what? Actually, there's too much time on the clock. Let's go for it on fourth down. Take the clock all the way down, then kick the field goal. One of the gutsiest and riskiest plays I've ever seen. But it pays off. You know, Dan Campbell had faith in his offense, and I do kind of understand the rationale for it.
I do.
I probably still would have been like, just kick the field goal. Like, trust your defense to not let Jordan Love, go all the way down the field. But, that's why I'm sitting here, and that's why Dan Campbell's coach of the Detroit Lions. It's just what an epic, Stones moment to kind of just lay it out there on the field and be like, nope, we're just taking this from you right now.
He is the Randy
win.
Yeah, he's the Randy Marsh meme. Like, he just carries his nuts in a wheelbarrow.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And what I love so much about how that game ended, so it was a great game, right? And listen, the Packers are very for real. I think that if you're any team in the NFC, the Packers are not going to win the division. The Vikings still have a really good chance to win the division. But the Packers are done in the division. So if you're any of those division winners, I really think seeing the Packers on Wild Card Weekend is
it would be brutal.
Sentence. It's a death sentence for a lot of those teams. I'm looking at you, NFC West and NFC South. Like, you're both going like, this could be a one and done, right? They're a fearless team. They have a ton of weapons. They play good defense in spurts. Their defense isn't as good as
run the football
start there, and they run the football extremely well. Josh Jacobs, I mean, everyone's been talking about Saquon, Derrick Henry, rightfully so. Josh Jacobs has had an incredible year in his first year in Green Bay. That being said, the Lions are the Lions, and they are the number one team in the NFL right now, deservedly so, because of moments like this. Dan Campbell has built such a culture where his team is frothing at the mouth to go for it in these situations. And his team would be angry with him if they didn't go for it. And if they missed that field goal and leave that much time on the clock, and then the Packers gain 30 yards and kick a game-winning field goal, what are we saying? Dan Campbell's lost his mojo. The Lions have lost their mojo. They didn't go for it, and blah, blah, blah. So what does he do? He goes for it. And so I don't criticize him at all. I think it's the right call for the culture that this team is and the foundation of this team. And if they lose that and they don't get it, every single Lions player in that locker room will say, that's on us. We're built to go for it on fourth down, and we didn't
They would do it again.
They would do it again 100 times out of 100. So if that's your culture and that's the makeup of your team, listen, this isn't like the Miami Dolphins, who is a more finesse team saying, let's go for it, right? This is what you're built on. So I loved it. Loved it. The Lions are the number one team in the NFL. They're the Super Bowl favorites. They should be with the Chiefs because of plays and games like that.
You mentioned the Dolphins. They won in overtime against the Jets, who are somehow starting to actually seem to get a rhythm offensively, but it doesn't matter, of course. But the Dolphins are 6-7. I mean, they're the 9 seed right now in the AFC. What are the odds that you like? Do you think that they can actually make a run here? Because I certainly think they're a better team than the Colts, which are just ahead of them as the 8 seed. It could really easily come down to like Miami and Denver, and and we'll talk about the Bengals later. But I feel like Miami has a chance. But again, it's December football for the Miami Dolphins. So what are we going to get?
I'll talk really quickly about the win. I think for the Jets fans, it was a win in the sense that you don't want to be winning games at this point in the season. But what do you want to see? You want to see that, hey, if Aaron Rodgers does come back next year, he still shows moments. And Aaron Rodgers showed the moments in that game, right? It was like, okay, if Aaron Rodgers can buy into a coaching staff and a game plan and not just be I'm in charge, if he plays and he's somewhat healthy and plays like that, then again, you can convince yourself that this is a team that maybe could turn it around and be a wild card team that is a dangerous team next year, right? Because they have a defense with pieces and they have weapons. So I'll say that. For the Dolphins, again, this team now is playing really, really sound football. This team is playing really fun offensive football, what we expected this team to be. Tua's taking all the accountability. He said a couple of weeks ago at the podium, like, yeah, we're in this position because I didn't take care of my health. He's a leader in that way. I respect him. Again, I don't think their ceiling is high, but I do agree with you. They are a team that I think is right now better than the Colts. Are they as good as the Broncos? I don't know. That's a really
close,
tough
though.
call.
It's close.
Dan, I'll say this. To me, we can talk more about the Dolphins after this weekend. They are at Houston. Houston's coming off a bye. Houston's not been playing well. If Miami can beat Houston in Houston, then there is a real chance we're talking about the Miami Dolphins in the playoffs. And Dan, I had a little bit of fun this morning because we're not going to talk about Houston. They didn't play a game. So I'm going to quickly squeeze this in. I had a little bit of fun this morning. I went on the ESPN playoff machine and I just gut blind picked games. I looked at it and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute. Where's Houston? And I didn't have Houston in the playoffs. Dan, they are home against the Dolphins, at Kansas City, home against the Ravens, and then the Titans on the road in the final game. That's a really tough stretch. If they lose to Miami, they could easily miss the playoffs if the Colts catch fire. That's the kind of big if. But if you look at the Colts schedule, Dan, they have the schedule to catch fire. The Colts, if they can beat the Broncos, then it's Titans, Giants, Jags. So the Colts season hinges on this Broncos game. And in a lot of ways, the Dolphins and the Texans season, both their seasons hinge on this weekend as well. So we'll talk more about projecting, but I want to give our listeners a little that nugget. 2 ginormous games in week 15, Texans and Dolphins, Colts and Broncos, truly will define the rest of the season for both teams, for all 4 of those teams.
A team that's been falling apart is the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins, again, just looking brutal. And
0
the Minnesota
touchdowns,
Vikings.
8 interceptions in the last 4.
That's unbelievable how bad that has been. Sam Darnold on the other side has a career day, 5 touchdowns, 347 yards. Absolutely wild, the performance that he's had this season. And again, the Vikings are 11-2. They are for real. They are legit. I still have my concerns about them in terms of playoffs. Like, I'm not sure how convinced I am that they can win 2 playoff games and get themselves to the conference championship and or Super Bowl. But man, it's a team that's playing like they got nothing to lose. They're playing inspired football. And they're just really sound across the board. It was impressive. I now fully am on board with the Falcons are like not. It's to me, even though they're still close in the division, to me it's over. Like to me, this is the Buccaneers division to lose. The Falcons are pretty much a non-factor in my view.
Remember, we talked about it. The Buccaneers were going to need to basically win out and then get some help. I didn't think they'd get this much help from Atlanta. Atlanta is falling off the map. Now, the benefit for Atlanta is they have the Raiders, the Giants, the next 2. So Atlanta could quickly turn this around and end up 8-7, and that keeps the pressure on Tampa. And remember, they have the tiebreaker over Tampa because they have that both head-to-head wins. So they also have the Panthers in their last game. So you could make the argument Atlanta should end up at worst 9-8 if they turn this thing around, which I think they're capable of doing that, right? So that does keep the pressure on Tampa. I will say this. If they lose this week to the Raiders, who are going to be starting, I think, Desmond Ridder in a revenge game.
It's going to be Desmond Ridder. Yeah, exactly.
You have to legitimately talk about putting Michael Penix. If it's because it's Kirk Cousins, you have to legitimately talk about putting Michael Penix in for the stretch run and just to see what the kid has. I will say this about the Vikings. I truly think they are the 3rd best team in the NFC. I think it's a coin flip between them and the Eagles for the 2nd best team. And I will firmly plant my flag on the set of saying I was absolutely dead wrong in them. Brian Flores is completely turned that defense around.
He made a
Kevin
huge difference.
O'Connell is just an absolute wizard. To me, he's approaching into that like conversation of like, okay, outside of Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, he's probably the in that top 5 of like the guy I draft as a coach, right? Like to like start my franchise with. He's in the discussion. Absolutely. in that top 5 discussion. And I'll say this, Sam Darnold. I mean, Vikings fans got to start asking themselves,
It's been
what
good.
the fuck do we do?
Because
Because
they're probably going to have to franchise him, Mark. That's what I think they're going to have to
I
do.
think that's the best thing. And then you go into the season, you say to McCarthy, listen, take the advice from the team to your right on the map, to your east on the map in Green Bay, and just say, why do we have to start the kid? Like, we don't have to start the kid. But Green Bay didn't start
a
the
year
kid.
coming off of injury, uncertainty.
Yes.
Like, you take a healthy year to sit behind now, and
they
we'll
should
reevaluate.
franchise him. And then if I was a team, I would legitimately offer a 2nd round pick and maybe another asset for Sam Darnold. If you're telling me available quarterbacks on the market, I'm going in this offseason. Right now, my power ranking is Sam Darnold 1, Shedeur Sanders 2. Like,
yeah,
I'm dead
you know who
serious.
could have used that type of quarterback? The San Francisco 49ers that had Sam Darnold in their building.
And if
this a year ago,
and if you are the Niners, wouldn't you rather take Sam Darnold on a 4-year deal that's more affordable than whatever you're going to have to play Brock Purdy?
Yes,
I think they would, but they're not going to
Absolutely.
admit it, and they're going to play
Yeah.
Purdy. Grace
Yeah.
is shutting the door on you. All right.
Yes.
So a great win for the Vikings. The Vikings are absolutely still capable of winning the NFC North. Do not count them out of the NFC North. They still have a head-to-head with the Lions and a game against the Bears on Monday night this week, which is absolutely winnable. So they're going to be in position.
Yeah, they for sure are. The Eagles improved to 11-2, a rough win, 22-16. If we had a worst win on the books, that probably would be it. Obviously, a lot has come out now about the drama in the locker room. AJ Brown very unhappy. Brandon Graham maybe speaking out of turn, talking about how their relationship has been soured, and then walking back those comments saying, "Oh, I actually didn't understand what was actually happening," and blah blah blah. I think what he said first was probably correct, and he's trying to do some damage control. But nonetheless, it seems like a little turbulent there in Philly, but they've overcome this before. They overcame this kind of earlier this season, to be honest with you. So I'm not sure how worried I am on the worry meter, but, at 11-2, they have room for some of this to occur. But with a matchup against Pittsburgh, I think this is a very, very important week for them to kind of get back and actually pull off an impressive win because you barely beat the Panthers last week. On the flip side, obviously it's important for Pittsburgh too to keep pace in their division. But for the Eagles, I mean, if they still want to compete for that 1 seed, there's a lot riding on this week for them for sure.
You just say it in talking. Week 14 was kind of a dud as far as slate of games. There were some great games, but overall it's kind of like, a lot of some ugly matchups because it was the final bye week. You were just teasing it there. This is not like the 4th most important game. I mean, Steelers and Eagles next week is a massive game. I'll say this really quickly. Panthers, isn't it absolutely wild that the Panthers fans can honestly sit there and say, maybe we feel better about our situation than Chicago does right now.
Yeah.
It's fucking insane, but that's where we're at as a Bears fan and as a Panthers fan. You got to be feeling positive. It's not great. Listen, Bryce Young is at best now Tua, right? Like that's his ceiling, which we know
but
is
he's improving,
limited.
Which is what you want. Yeah.
But it's a capable starting quarterback who you don't have to pay for the next 3 years. And you're not in a win now mode anyway. So just keep building it and then toss him to the side when you're ready to then go get your franchise guy in 2 years when your organization's ready to build, when you recoup some of your draft and all that stuff. So positive vibes for the Panthers. For the Eagles, really quickly, they are an absolute juggernaut at running the football, and it's so much fun to watch. And A.J. Brown is the epitome of diva wide receivers. He got paid again. They are the only losses the Eagles have in the season are when A.J. Brown does not play. So he has all of these things that could be saying, dude, you're in an amazing situation. You are a stud. You are a star. And yet he's bitching and moaning. He's not getting the ball enough.
Exactly.
This is, and listen, I'm going through it with DJ Moore a little bit right now. DJ Moore was nothing but amazing last year. And now DJ Moore got paid and it seems to be the leader of all the mutinies that have led my team to just not play well. And it seems he hates the young quarterback when I don't think he realizes, dude, you're not nearly as important as the young quarterback. And it's the same thing with the Eagles. Like Jalen Hurts got paid. Jalen Hurts is there. And Jalen Hurts is the focal point of your running offense that is leading you to being
Saquon matters more to the team than A.J. Brown right now.
Right now.
And
A.J. Brown can't just ride it and ride the wave of excitement and fun and wins. It's a dangerous situation there. And I think you're not trading him. And I'll say this, the second point is Sirianni. Like, dude, what are you doing? You're not the offensive coordinator, right? You're not the defensive coordinator. Your job as the head coach is to make sure everyone is simpatico. And you can't even fucking do that. Like, what are you doing, Nick Sirianni? A little bit of a mess in Philly. We saw it how it ended last year after the hot start. Can they change the vibes? Massive game versus Pittsburgh this weekend. Yeah. And we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, can the Steelers take advantage of this turmoil in Philly and, capitalize and keep the momentum going on their side? They beat the Browns 27-14.
Great win.
Good rebound win after losing to them a couple weeks ago.
No George Pickens.
No George Pickens, which that's it's important for a multitude of reasons. It was good to see them score 27 points without George Pickens.
Agreed.
It was good to see Russell throw 2 touchdowns without George Pickens.
Agreed.
Russell is seeming to get more and more comfortable in this offense and a little bit more free. He had a couple RPOs that he pulled it himself and ran the football, like a couple nice scrambles. So I think he's starting to get more comfortable, which is a great sign. It looks like George Pickens is not going to play this upcoming week. And so a grade 2 hamstring, those can linger. I would rather they just keep him out. And if it's got to be 2 weeks, so be it. Save him as much as you can for that deep stretch for the playoff run. I know these games are important, but if the Pittsburgh has an opportunity to show that they can win and beat good teams without George Pickens, which would be massive, because if you told me that, 8 weeks ago, I would have said no chance.
No,
I mean, and this was kind of part of the problem that they set themselves up for when they let Deontay Johnson go, which was probably the right move overall. They didn't properly ensure that they were primed to get a free agent. They were in the market. They just didn't land one. And then the draft, they take Roman Wilson out of Michigan. He gets hurt. He hasn't played more than like 3 snaps all season.
Austin's been okay. Mike Williams has been okay.
Calvin Austin's fine, and now we got to hope that Mike Williams, hopefully that he gets more involved in this offense, because they're going to need him now moving forward. But no, overall, I thought it was a good win for Pittsburgh, and sets up a great opportunity for them this week. And it is funny, even though they lost, just to see like the Browns are just way better with Jameis Winston than they are with Deshaun Watson. It's hilarious. Even though obviously Jameis made some like boneheaded mistakes and stuff, but
Jameis is he's not who you want to build around, but it just goes to show Deshaun was still the problem. And I think that was it's an important lesson for Cleveland. I'll say this, Dan, again, on my NFL playoff, machine. When it came down to it, I had the Steelers winning the division still, but I started to look at it and I started then futzing. If the Steelers in the AFC, pretty much 10 wins, you should feel like 80% sure you're in the playoffs. Steelers already have 10 wins. The Steelers are one of like 2 teams that can have 10 wins and not make the playoffs. Basically, for the Steelers, it's win one of the next 4, and you almost guarantee you win the division and you're in the playoffs. So they have an extremely tough schedule, right? Philly, Baltimore, Chiefs, Bengals. That is murder's row. But if you're saying to yourself, we just got to win one of them, mainly the Ravens game, and we lock up the division, that's a good feeling. It's a really good feeling. So I think for Pittsburgh, it's to me, they feel like that hang on for dear life, win one goddamn game, and then reset. And then once the playoffs comes, they're going to be a nightmare. In Pittsburgh hosting games, Renegade blasting that defense. Russell not turning the ball over. No, that seems for real.
And I mean, look, we talked about them entering this 8-game slog at 7-2 and saying like, okay, they prime themselves as good. They're 3-1 to start this 8-game slog. Like,
it's huge.
Pretty good. It's pretty.
They just got to win one more. They got to win one more. Yeah. I think they'll probably win 2 more, but they got to win 1 more.
The Buccaneers beat the Raiders 28-13. we can kind of rifle through this because I want to get to Bears, 49ers, and Chiefs, Chargers real quick too.
Yeah.
But yeah, just any comments on the Bucks? Really, they seem to be rolling.
No, yeah. Listen, the Bucks are so much fun. They have these moments in the game where their offense just stops working, and then it's like, what's going on? But once they get going and Baker has time, they're a really, really tough offense to stop. Remember, the Bucks are the only team to beat the Lions. This is a team that can go big game hunting. We saw it last year in the playoffs too with the win over Philadelphia. So they're like the Rams. If you are the cream of the crop in the NFC, the Vikings, the Eagles, the Lions, you don't want to see the Bucks and the Rams get in. You'd much rather see Atlanta and Seattle get in, or honestly, Atlanta and San Francisco, because it feels like San Francisco is just out of juice, or Arizona, because it feels like they'll just create a bad turnover. So for the Bucks and the Rams right now, they are the teams that are like no holds bar. Their playoffs have started, the Rams and the Bucks, and that's a dangerous thing for teams with really great quarterback play right now and a ton of great weapons.
You know, I thought the 49ers were going to be, we talked about it. I was the one that was saying that they were going to win this race in the NFC West, and then they promptly go and lose 3 straight. And so I'm totally out on the 49ers. But then they win, a couple days ago against your Chicago Bears, 38-13, kind of a mess. Thomas Brown's first run there as interim head coach. I don't think the 49ers are in play. They are obviously like on paper, but we've talked about it. Seattle,
they have to
Los
win
Angeles got to be the top 2 there. But any thoughts on this matchup? You being the resident Bears fan on the show, wanted to get your thoughts on this matchup.
I don't want to dwell too much because we have tons of time to talk about the Bears and their awfulness once the offseason starts. My gut feeling is like, I just wish it was over. Like, it's just like, this is the thing that's really frustrating.
Big Cat said that too. I thought that was great. He's like, let's just get to the offseason.
I'm sure he did, because we feel very similar about a lot of things. I mean, most Chicago sports fans do. I mean, this is the most frustrating season, in my opinion, of the George McCaskey-led era, because there deservedly so was a lot of hype, and there deservedly so was a lot of belief, and the schedule was really workable for this to be a borderline playoff team or a playoff team, and to be really fun and feisty. And all we've gotten is absolute circus and clown show. And what I think is really, really hard about that first half and really depressing overall about this game is that we knew the defense would take a step back when Eberflus was fired, right? So it didn't shock me that the Niners came out with a ton of points and life. What really shocked me was that every team gets an interim head coach bump, and the Bears offense was the worst statistical offense in a first half in like 40 years.
4 yards.
Yeah. And to me, what that again shows is that you have a culture problem. And Thomas Brown clearly is not the guy that these players are fighting for. And why I said for many weeks, don't fire Eberflus, just ride this thing out, is because, again, I didn't want to see the Thomas Brown experience. And I never wanted to have that question mark of, well, maybe Thomas Brown's the guy. I never believed Thomas Brown would be the guy. If Thomas Brown even had a chance to be the guy, they would have hired him as the offensive coordinator. He already had a chance to be an offensive coordinator before in spaces. Thomas Brown is a great NFL assistant coach, and you give him a role, and he fires guys up, and he can coach a position group or things like that. But again, they reverted to a lot of bad offensive spacing, lack of offensive identity. And this is a team now where you really look at Ryan Poles, and a lot of the moves he's made are starting to get really suspect. We know the Chase Claypool move was bad, but we give him credit for that because it was like he took a stab. He nailed the trade, right? The trade was still a win. But now when you start looking at DeAndre Swift over David Montgomery, that's a huge L. You start looking at the Nate Davis and offensive line improvements over, and he got rid of your guy who's in Pittsburgh now, the guard.
James Daniels.
James Daniels. So you start to look at some of these things and you really question a lot of what they've done. Remember, he was the one who traded Roquan Smith as well. And you start saying to yourself, man, I don't know. And now you question the structure. The Bears are a joke. And for the 49ers, there's nothing to talk about. Thursday night is their season. They've put themselves in the spot for Thursday night to be their season. They had to win this game so Thursday night could be their season. This was a coaching mismatch. This was a Hall of Fame caliber coach, talent. Yeah. He doesn't have the resume, but talent versus an interim guy who couldn't even get the guys to fight for him. So that's what that game was.
Yep, for sure. All right, we'll pull up the Super Bowl plane and kind of combine this into discussing the Chiefs because the Chiefs are listed. They're in first class. They beat the Chargers 19-17 on a doink field goal that went in the final seconds. Everyone complaining how lucky the Chiefs are. I get it. Yes, they do. They have gotten lucky this year. But a lot of times you make your own luck in this league, and they've set themselves up to have these moments at the end of the games where things can go their way, and they've done it yet again. And that was unfortunate for me as a Steelers fan. Didn't want them to get this win. Chargers were very close. I think the fact that the Chargers held them to 19 points, kept this close, says a lot about the Chargers as a team and how quality they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Chiefs are still that dude, in the AFC. And right now they're a contender. That's why they are in the first class along with the Detroit Lions.
The Chiefs are the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, if you remember during the heyday of the San Antonio Spurs dynasty throughout the early 2000s, and then when it picked back up with Kawhi Leonard when they were older, what did they do? They were like the 4 seed. They were like, the 2 seed. Sometimes they get the 1 seed, but you just didn't worry about that. Their whole thing was just get to the playoffs. And it really feels like the Kansas City Chiefs in a lot of ways they're offensively just not the same team. I think there's 2 reasons why. Nagy versus Bieniemy. Bieniemy wants to take more shots and encourages Andy Reid and is in Andy Reid's headset to be like, let's take more shots. Matt Nagy is more scheme into the ball, playmakers' hands, close to the line of scrimmage, and then pick up chunk plays that way, right? So Matt Nagy in Andy Reid's ear and designing offense in that ways, you're seeing it more. Also with the personnel, they have an old DeAndre Hopkins, an old Juju Smith-Schuster, an old Travis Kelce. Noah Gray is their threat down the middle. Xavier Worthy is a gadget guy. We now know that he's not an every down. He's a gadget 3 on a great offense. He's a gadget 4. And so they're missing Hollywood Brown, right? They're missing some go-to possession receivers who really can run those 20-yard out routes to make life easy. So they're winning the way they have to win. Rely on your defense, run the ball, methodical drives, and then when it comes down to crunch time, you have the best coach and the best quarterback in the NFL. So I'm not worried about the Chiefs at all. I think it's hilarious they're winning games like this, driving people nuts. I was in Arrowhead for the Black Friday game. We didn't get to talk last week, but it was an amazing experience seeing them in person. Win that game again was just another example of man, oh man, oh man, they have an edge that you don't see regularly in the NFL history. I do think they do have a slight concern, and why I keep the Lions slightly ahead of them is that I haven't seen them win 44-43. Their close wins are 17-19. They're low scoring games. So
they're not winning shootouts.
If the Chiefs in the last couple games win close and in shootouts, I'll feel way more comfortable about them as a whole. But I have a 1% discomfort because of that.
All right, let's rifle through 60-second lightning round here. Your business class. You've got Steelers, Ravens, Eagles, Vikings, and Bills. So the Bills dropping down to first class.
Yeah, I had to drop the Bills slightly just because their defense that was so porous on the road in a big game. But all those teams absolutely could be in a championship game, and it wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah. No argument there. In economy, we've got the Chargers, the Packers, Bucks, and Seahawks. Why the Rams? I mean.
So I didn't want to overload economy. I put the Bucks over the Rams just because I think the Bucks have a clearer line to make the playoffs than the Rams right now. So that was my thought on that. The Bucks and the Rams, it's like a 50-50 split. I will say if the Rams get in the playoffs, I absolutely think they could win a game. So they are next week I should probably, depending on what happens, absolutely. But the Rams probably should be on here. I didn't want to bump the Chargers out. I still think the Chargers are worthy of. The Chargers could win a playoff game with the wild card quality team
for sure. Yeah, no. Quality team, almost beat the
And they
the
had no
Chiefs,
Dobbins,
so, yeah.
no Lad McConkey. If they get their two best weapons back, absolutely they can win a playoff game.
Yeah, they'll be fine. All right, that does it for our Week 14 recap here on the Football Lounge. Check us out on socials at FB Lounge Pod. We are part of the For Frequency Sake podcast network. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you here next week.
This has been a For Frequency Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.